What if I told you there was a city in 290 BC that felt more global than many cities today? Hey everyone, I'm Jimmy Fallon, and welcome to CityRelive. Tonight we're stepping into ancient Alexandria, where ideas, trade, and ambition met the sea. Some visuals you'll see are symbolic recreations and may not perfectly match every detail, so thanks for understanding. If you love journeys like this, subscribe and stay with us. Now sit back, relax, and let's travel into history together. In 290 BC, Alexandria stood at the height of its early promise, already recognized as the leading intellectual and commercial center of the Mediterranean world. If you were standing on its limestone quays at sunrise, watching merchant vessels approach from every direction, you would understand why. Grain from the Nile Valley moved outward to feed distant populations. Luxury goods passed through its harbors on their way between Africa, the Near East, and the wider Mediterranean basin. Trade was not just activity here, it was identity. The city breathed through its ports. Alexandria had been founded only a few decades earlier by Alexander the Great, whose campaign reshaped the political map of the eastern Mediterranean. He chose this stretch of coast deliberately, positioned between the sea and the fertile Nile Delta, envisioning a city that would connect Greece and Egypt in both power and culture. After his death, that vision did not fade. It was taken up and solidified by Ptolemy I Soter, one of Alexander's generals, who secured Egypt and established a new ruling dynasty. Under Ptolemy's authority, Alexandria became more than a strategic settlement. It became the capital of a kingdom and the focal point of a new Hellenistic order. By 290 BC, the city was already being called the Pearl of the Mediterranean. The phrase was not poetic exaggeration. Its influence radiated outward across sea lanes that linked three continents. While other regions of the known world were marked by conflict and shifting alliances, Alexandria projected stability, ambition, and cultural confidence. It was designed to face the sea rather than retreat into the desert, signaling its outward-looking character. When you picture Alexandria at this moment, think of a young but self-assured metropolis. It carried the memory of Alexander's ambition and the administrative strength of Ptolemy's rule. It stood at the intersection of commerce and ideas, positioned to shape the centuries that followed, and in 290 BC, that future was only just beginning. What made Alexandria truly extraordinary in 290 BC was not only its ambition, but its design. This was not a city that had grown slowly over centuries in winding alleys and irregular clusters. It was planned, carefully, intentionally. From the beginning, its layout reflected a vision of order and control that matched the political confidence of its rulers. The city was designed according to the Hippodamian grid system, a rational urban model associated with the Greek world and implemented here by Dinocrates of Rhodes. Streets intersected at right angles, forming a structured pattern that allowed movement, ventilation, and visibility. If you imagine walking through it, you would not find the maze-like congestion common in older cities. Instead, wide limestone paved avenues opened before you, aligned to catch the prevailing northern winds from the Mediterranean. This was practical urban engineering. The sea breeze cooled the streets, carried away dust, and made dense urban life more bearable in the Egyptian climate. The plan itself tells you something about the mindset of the era. Alexandria was built to function. At the heart of this grid ran the Canopic Way, the principal artery of the city. Stretching several kilometers from east to west, it connected major districts and structured civic life. Colonnades lined portions of the avenue, creating shaded walkways for merchants, officials, and scholars. This was not simply a road, it was a stage for public life. Processions would have passed along it. Royal authority would have been visible here. Markets and administrative buildings were positioned with deliberate logic. When you picture Alexandria at its height, the Canopic Way is the spine that holds everything together. To the north, engineering reshaped geography itself. The Heptastadion, a massive causeway roughly 7 stadia in length, linked the mainland to the island of Pharos. This was more than a connection, it transformed the coastline. By joining the island to the city, it created 2 large natural harbours, one facing east and the other west. These harbours allowed Alexandria to dominate maritime trade in multiple directions. Ships from the Aegean, from the Levant, and from North Africa could anchor with relative security. The structure required enormous labour and coordination, reflecting both resources and administrative capability. When you consider its scale, you begin to see how seriously the Ptolemaic regime viewed maritime power. And rising on the island of Pharos in 290 BC, construction was underway on a structure that would define the skyline for centuries. The Lighthouse of Pharos was in progress during this period, commissioned under Ptolemy I and completed under his successor. Ancient sources suggest a height between roughly 100 and 130 meters, making it one of the tallest man-made structures of the ancient world. Its purpose was practical. A fire burned at its summit to guide ships safely into harbour, reducing the dangers of hidden shoals and shifting coastal currents. Yet, its scale also carried symbolic weight. It announced Alexandria's presence to every approaching vessel. When you connect these elements together, the grid, the Grand Avenue, the engineered causeway, and the rising lighthouse, you see more than infrastructure. You see a city built with strategic clarity. Alexandria was designed to be legible, navigable, and powerful. It faced the sea with confidence, and in 290 BC, its physical form already reflected the global role it was determined to play. If the harbours and avenues gave Alexandria its physical power, its true heartbeat in 290 BC lay in something less visible, but far more enduring. This was the moment when the city began to define itself as the intellectual centre of the ancient world. Under the patronage of Ptolemy I Soter, plans were set in motion for institutions unlike anything that had existed before. The Mausion and the Great Library were not simply buildings, they were a statement of intent. The Mausion, dedicated to the Muses, functioned as a community of scholars supported by the state. It was modelled in part on earlier Greek traditions of philosophical schools, yet it operated on a scale that was new. Scholars were given stipends, accommodation, and the freedom to pursue research. In practical terms, this meant that knowledge became a matter of royal policy. When you think about that, it feels surprisingly modern. A government investing resources into research, mathematics, medicine, literature, and philosophy. Alexandria was not waiting for ideas to drift in, it was actively cultivating them. Closely linked to the Mausion was the Great Library of Alexandria. Its ambition was extraordinary. The goal was to collect as much of the world's written knowledge as possible. Ancient sources describe aggressive acquisition policies. Ships entering the harbour were reportedly searched for books. Texts were copied, preserved, and added to the collection. While exact numbers remain debated among historians, the scale was unquestionably vast for its time. Papyrus scrolls were organised, catalogued, and studied. This was not just storage, it was curation. Within this environment, figures such as Euclid found a home. Euclid, later known as the father of geometry, is believed to have worked in Alexandria during the reign of Ptolemy I. His work elements would go on to shape mathematical education for more than 2,000 years. When you picture him here, you are not imagining myth, but a scholar operating within a structured intellectual ecosystem. The city provided the conditions for systematic thought. Another towering figure associated with early Alexandrian scholarship is Herophilus. He is remembered as a pioneering anatomist who conducted detailed studies of the human body. In a period when empirical investigation was often limited by cultural taboos, his anatomical research represented a serious commitment to observation and documentation. Alexandria allowed that kind of inquiry to take place. The library sought not only scientific texts but also literature and philosophy. Works attributed to Homer were preserved and studied. Dialogues of Plato were collected. The tragedies of Sophocles circulated in scholarly circles. Texts moved across languages, including Greek and Egyptian traditions, and likely others present in the multicultural city. Translation and comparison became intellectual tools. The result was not uniformity but conversation. As you imagine Alexandria in 290 BC, try to see it not only as stone and harbour water, but as a network of minds. Scholars debating in shaded courtyards, scribes copying scrolls with disciplined precision, administrators cataloguing knowledge with quiet ambition. The city that faced the sea also faced the future of human thought. Its rulers understood that power was not secured by walls alone, but by ideas carefully gathered and preserved. By 290 BC, the institutions of knowledge in Alexandria were inseparable from the people who animated them. What truly set the city apart was not only its library or its grid of avenues, but the diversity of those who walked its streets each day. Alexandria became one of the earliest large-scale examples of a genuinely multicultural city in the ancient Mediterranean. Greeks formed the political and administrative elite under the Ptolemaic dynasty. Their language shaped governance, scholarship, and public life. Yet, they did not exist in isolation. Native Egyptians continued long-established religious traditions, maintained temples, and played essential roles in agriculture and local administration. A substantial Jewish community also took root in the city, contributing to commerce, intellectual life, and cultural exchange. These groups lived in distinct quarters at times, but they shared markets, ports, and civic spaces. Interaction was constant. When we call Alexandria a melting pot, it is not a modern slogan imposed on the past. It reflects a documented reality of coexistence and exchange. Languages overlapped, religious ideas encountered one another, economic interests aligned across cultural lines. This environment did not eliminate tension, as no complex city ever does, but it fostered an atmosphere where difference was visible and functional rather than hidden. There was also a sense of optimism that marked Alexandria in this period. The city was young, ambitious, and backed by a stable ruling structure. Royal patronage encouraged scholarship and trade. Merchants could operate within a predictable framework. Scholars could pursue inquiry with institutional support. Compared to other regions of the known world during the same decades, this stability stands out. Rome was emerging from the Samnite conflicts that had reshaped central Italy. In East Asia, the Warring States period continued to generate prolonged military struggle. Against that broader backdrop, Alexandria projected confidence. Imagine walking along the harbour and hearing multiple languages carried on the sea breeze. Picture temple rituals taking place not far from Greek philosophical discussion. See Jewish traders negotiating contracts while Egyptian priests maintain ancient rites. This was daily life. Cultural identity did not dissolve, but it interacted. Alexandria became a refuge for ideas precisely because it was open. Its diversity strengthened rather than weakened its intellectual mission. Science and culture require dialogue, and dialogue requires difference. In 290 BC, this coastal city offered both. It stood not as a closed imperial capital, but as a meeting ground where traditions encountered one another and, in doing so, helped shape a new Hellenistic world. For all its intellectual ambition and commercial energy, Alexandria in 290 BC was also the center of a carefully constructed royal narrative. The Ptolemaic dynasty understood that cities are sustained not only by trade and scholarship, but by symbols of legitimacy and continuity. Political meaning was built directly into the urban landscape. Around this time, Berenice, the wife of Ptolemy I Soter, was elevated in status and honored as queen. Her prominence reflected more than personal affection. Royal marriages in the Hellenistic world carried strategic weight, reinforcing alliances and strengthening dynastic claims. The naming of the city of Berenice on the Red Sea further illustrates this strategy. Founded to support maritime trade routes linking Egypt to Arabia and beyond, it expanded the commercial reach of the kingdom, while also projecting the royal family's presence across distant territories. Trade and dynasty moved together. Economic infrastructure and political identity were intertwined. Back in Alexandria itself, the royal quarter known as the Bruchium formed the heart of authority. This district housed palaces, administrative buildings, and spaces tied directly to the ruling family. It was not merely a residential zone, it was a visible concentration of power. Decisions that shaped trade policy, military planning, and intellectual patronage flowed from this area into the wider Mediterranean world. Within this same royal zone stood the Soma, the mausoleum associated with Alexander the Great. After his death, his body had become an object of enormous political symbolism. By securing his remains in Alexandria, the Ptolemies linked their rule to his legacy. The presence of Alexander's tomb reinforced the idea that this city was not an accidental capital. It was the heir to a world-conquering vision. As you picture Alexandria at sunset, with its harbours active and its scholars at work, remember that all of this rested upon deliberate dynastic strategy. The rulers shaped space to shape memory. They embedded their authority in stone, ceremony, and geography. In 290 BC, political power in Alexandria was not hidden behind walls. It was integrated into the city's identity, guiding its future with calculated confidence. By 290 BC, when you step back and look at everything we have explored, Alexandria stands as one of the clearest expressions of the Hellenistic age at its height. It was not the largest city in human history, nor the oldest, but it captured the spirit of a world reshaped by Alexander's conquests and reorganized under new dynasties. Greek language and administrative systems blended with Egyptian tradition. Royal power supported scholarship. Maritime trade connected continents. In that convergence, you can see the essence of the Hellenistic experiment. Alexandria represented more than political control. It embodied a cultural synthesis. Greek philosophical traditions operated alongside ancient Egyptian religious institutions. Jewish communities contributed to commercial and intellectual life. Ideas traveled as reliably as grain shipments. Mathematics, medicine, literature, and theology circulated through the same streets that carried spices and timber. Commerce and thought were not separate spheres. They reinforced one another. When historians describe the Hellenistic world, they often point to the spread of Greek culture across vast territories stretching from the eastern Mediterranean towards Central Asia. Alexandria became one of the most visible centers of that transformation. It was a place where Greek became the language of administration and scholarship, yet local traditions were neither erased nor silent. Instead, they interacted. The result was not uniformity, but layered identity. That layered identity is one of the reasons the city's influence endured long after individual rulers passed from the scene. Perhaps the most powerful symbol of Alexandria's character was its orientation. The city quite literally faced the Mediterranean. Its harbours opened outward, its lighthouse signalled to distant ships, its trade networks extended beyond the Nile Valley into a wider, interconnected world. This outward stance reflected a mindset. Alexandria was not inward-looking. It defined itself through exchange. As you imagine the city in 290 BC, with sunlight reflecting off pale stone and sails gathering wind offshore, you are witnessing more than an ancient capital. You are seeing a model of connectivity. The Hellenistic age was about movement, adaptation, and shared intellectual space. Alexandria captured that energy in physical form. It stood as a reminder that progress in the ancient world was often built where cultures met, where knowledge was preserved, and where a city dared to look beyond its horizon. For me, Alexandria in 290 BC is more than a chapter in history. It feels like a turning point, where ideas, cultures, and ambition met the sea and chose to build something lasting. I would love to hear what part of this city fascinates you most. Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoy exploring the ancient world this way, subscribe to CityRelive and let us keep traveling through history together.